Hello, I'm Joel Daring with the Volleyball Hall of Fame. We're speaking one-on-one today with members of the induction class for 2013. This is Volleyball in Perspective. I'm joined by Caren Kemner. Welcome, Caren.
Thank you.
You're being inducted today for a tremendous career, perhaps remembered most for your dynamic attacking ability and strong defensive play while competing in 3 straight Olympics beginning in Seoul. You were part of the bronze medal teams for a USA team in the 1990 FIVB World Championships and in the 1992 Barcelona Games. In 1991, you were honored as the most outstanding player in the World Cup, and at the end of that year, you were honored as the FIVB Most Valuable Player. Just a few years later, in 1995, you helped lead your team to its very first FIVB World Grand Prix gold medal. So let's start at the beginning. Tell me about how you got involved in the sport, and tell us about your family.
Well, gosh, I'm the youngest of 5, a very athletic group. Matter of fact, I think if you look at the whole collection of relatives, I've got to believe there's like 20 or 30 of us, and we've always been in athletics ourselves. It was always baseball, anything outdoors. I think that was what our parents preferred. But you know, my initial start into volleyball, it would sometimes start probably around 7th grade in the CYO system. And back then it used to be 9 players and you kind of snaked your way through. But it really wasn't until my sophomore year in high school that the game fit, you know, like it started to click, you know, as a freshman. And as I was telling you off air, I was just told to jump and swing. And being a softball player, the swinging part was very easy. It was very similar to throwing a softball. But I felt like in my sophomore and junior year, it really all started to come together, but still not realizing that that would be my profession of choice. That part I wasn't sure of yet.
How about sports heroes growing up, or people you looked up to, or people who had a real influence on you getting on this track of becoming a tremendous athlete and Olympic volleyball player?
Well, I think the people that most had an impact were obviously ones that were closest to me, you know, my immediate family. I'd like to say that my grandfather was one of my heroes, but it was just because we were such good friends, and he was always extremely supportive of me playing sports. I think if I really had to pinpoint names, I thought for sure I was going to be a tennis player. I idolized Chrissy Everett-Lloyd. And at some point, I was pretty sure I was going to pitch in the World Series as a little kid. Even though girls weren't allowed to play baseball back then, I always felt like that was my calling. But as you know, obviously, I think family has a huge impact. And as I got more into the sport, I appreciated those who came before me: Flo Hyman, Rita Crockett, Debbie Green, you know, Debbie Landreth. I mean, there's so many wonderful women that played that game before me that kind of opened that avenue for me to go.
So you played at the University of Arizona as a 2-sport star, where you also competed in softball. Tell us about the challenges of competing at a high level in 2 sports.
I think more than anything, it was just trying to get the academic side of it. That was more of the challenging part. The aspect of playing 2 sports in college was, to me, nothing. It felt like my whole life I'd played multiple sports, and especially coming from a small town, you play volleyball, basketball, softball, soccer, whatever sports are required of you. Softball happened to be what I would consider my first love. Volleyball was secondary, but it seemed at a certain point that volleyball was going to open more doors. And I think part of that was just watching the '84 Olympics. And realizing that that was an opportunity that maybe someday down the line, and being that softball was an Olympic sport, you know, it was very close. Even to the point where right before I went to the national team tryout and was named to the national team, I was just about to the point of renouncing my volleyball scholarship and strictly playing softball, because I loved being outside and being dirty, you know, and I enjoyed that sport. It was something that was very family oriented for me.
So when you think about your early years leading up to getting on the national team and then competing internationally really for the first time, what are the things that come to mind when you go back to those years and all those years leading up to the '88 games?
Gosh, everything. I mean, everything on how it got started, even from the point of the first time I was introduced to Ari, and before the '84 Olympic Games, I was asked to come out to try out when I was 17. And you know, once again, I go back to, I was kind of a jumper. I didn't have the whole concept of the game down. Actually, I probably never went behind the 10-foot line. I was restricted to the front. And Ari at that point had asked me to do this defensive drill, and I kept thinking, I'm going to hurt somebody. They're 6 months from the Olympics. I should not be out there rolling, much less I didn't know how to roll. But you know, from the moment that I accepted the offer to go to the national program, it seemed like everything kind of went into light speed. Obviously because the substitution roles and the different rules, I had to go behind that 10-foot line and figure out the rest of the game. For me, I was also very fortunate that right across the curtain from me in San Diego was the men's '84 gold medalist team, Garch and all those guys. So I spent a lot of time peeking through that curtain and saying, okay, that's what this level's about.
Tell us about coaches you had and maybe differences and what you gained in your development from their teaching and their coaching.
I am probably one of the most fortunate women on the planet Earth to have played with Terry Liskevich, Ari Selinger. I had Long Ping for a little bit. I had some wonderful coaches overseas in Brazil and Italy, and I think Ari and Terry are very opposite from each other. Ari tends to be more of the Asian style, and I think Terry was trying to develop more of a U.S. style, having very athletic kids, trying to put in the quality of work and not the quantity. So there were two different styles there, but intense respect for both of them. We got along in very many different ways. I got along with Terry as a coach very well, and I got along with Ari off the court very well. Very intelligent people, and really formed a lot of what I think is what I try to now carry on and pass on to my kids.
What is it, you mentioned a little bit, but maybe expand a little. What is it about volleyball that's so special for you?
Having played so many different sports, I felt like it was the one sport that challenged me athletically, as far as coordination and your ability, but intellectually, it's also it's a very intelligent sport. Everything changes on a dime. Nothing is ever the same. I've played the game for 25 years, or give or take, and there was never a play the same. Never a contact was the same. Never was the score the same. And I know a lot of sports can say that, but when you have 6 people on a court and you're literally trying to move together in sync, I just find it amazing that at that high of a level, especially at the volleyball level that we're seeing today with the athletes, it's just amazing.
What's the most special part for you today in owning an Olympic medal from your team's bronze finish in Barcelona? And the follow-up to that is, because it may not be that, what's your biggest disappointment in your career, and what did you learn from it?
I smile. I guess before I can get to the bronze medal moment, I think it's the match right before that. Losing to Cuba in 5, especially knowing how well we played. And I've never gone back and watched the video. It's not one of those things I need to remember too much about, but I know that we had them. And of course, if Maria Luis was sitting here, she would tell me, no, you didn't, Caren. But I feel like we did. I really did. I felt like, there was definitely a change in momentum, unfortunate timing. I had a bad game, especially toward the end. So those are things that I prefer to let go of. But at the same time, the thing that I learned is within 12 to 24 hours later, I had an opportunity to still get on a podium. And the match against Brazil has always been challenging. They're really good athletes, very good friends. And I thought we handled them very, very well. I'll tell you, though, that match point, I actually think went like 15 rotations, because it was back in the day when it wasn't point per serve. It was, you had to serve to get the point. So that last point took a while to get to. But I think more than anything, I learned that you just got to overcome as quick as you can at this level. As quick as you are, an Olympian, a Hall of Famer or whatever, you're also just a regular person, and you have to bounce back.
It's not hard to find footage in this day and age. So I spent some time in the last few weeks watching your Olympic semifinal match against Cuba, and I think you're right. It seemed for so much of that match that the U.S. team was in control. And then I also watched the 95 FIVB Grand Prix finals with Brazil. And you just mentioned the traditional scoring and that changed. But aside from that, what do you think are the biggest changes in the game today from back then?
I think we're seeing, obviously the style of athlete that volleyball's getting. I mean, they're getting taller, faster, stronger, jump higher. I mean, back in the day, I was considered tall, and I'm 6'2". And by the time I retired, I always joked with Lori, because I got closer to the setter. I'm like, as soon as I get close to the setter, it was time for me to retire. But I do think that's the greatest change that I see, is just the size of athletes that are now coming into our game, which once maybe been reserved for basketball. Now you're seeing, 6'8", 6'9", 7 foot for some of the men. And I think that has a huge change on the game. Obviously the scoring changes. I was a little resistant to it in the beginning, the point per serve. But I have to say, I really enjoy it now. It's a different aspect.
You mentioned playing professionally, Italy, Japan, Brazil. What were the best and toughest parts of transitioning to new cultures and playing for a living?
I think transferring into a different culture. I think I've always been someone, perhaps I could say raised that way. You always have a great appreciation for the people that put food on your table. And, traveling like that around the world, it is different. I mean, living in Japan is completely different than living in Brazil. Living in Brazil is completely different than living in Italy. And I think for me, my challenge was I never went back to back. I was always from one country to another. So I'd pick up on one language, have to learn another language and a culture, and as well as the climate. Cold, hot. I mean, there was one year I was in summer for like 4 years straight, so I couldn't complain. But it is different to be paid. Sure. At that type of level. I mean, granted, as an athlete in the U.S. system, I was always paid, but that started to open the doors, which I'm very proud to say that I think I help open doors now for athletes going overseas and having more guaranteed type of contracts. It could have happened before me. I think it probably did with like Rita and Flo and some of those athletes, but I think, we continue just to kick those doors open. But anytime that you travel abroad and you try to assimilate into someone else's customs and religions and everything, and politics aside, I remember sitting in Italy when they began to bomb. I think it was the first in Iraq or something like that, and it was on TV, and all my teammates are looking at me. I'm like, don't look at me. I'm here right now. So there's always that responsibility too, as being an American.
Sure. So you didn't stop there. Later in your career, you also played beach volleyball with 2004 Volleyball Hall of Famer Caren Kemner on the AVP tour. Tell us about that experience.
It was great. I just wish I would have played beach maybe a little bit sooner, but I didn't feel my indoor career was ended. In '96, I felt like that was the time to walk away. It was in Atlanta. My family was able to be there, and I thought that was a really good time for me to step away from the indoor game. And at that time, my aspiration was to be one of those athletes who had a medal in the indoor and a medal in the outdoor. I just think it was a late window. And I really enjoyed it. I loved the fact that my office was a beach every day and that I got to play with such an amazing lady. And here, I'm being inducted with, Natalie, which is somebody that I played against briefly. But I think that's pretty special. It kind of brings it all together.
That's great. Give us your perspective regarding the growth of volleyball opportunities for young girls across the country now when you think back to when you first entered the sport.
Oh, I think it's drastically changed. I think, not only sports around the world have changed for young girls, but especially here in the United States. I think we're doing such a better job for our younger kids of identifying them and giving them opportunities. I know, like I said, when I was younger, I remember USA Volleyball. I remember certain things like, oh, you can come to this tryout. And I didn't because I was a softball player. But I think now we are identifying those kids and having a greater possibility of opening doors and getting them in systems that allow them to move forward at a much more comfortable place. I also think just the sheer numbers of athletes. I mean, I get a lot of kids that say, I want to be an Olympian. I'm like, it's harder now than it was then. And so I think those are some of the big changes, but I really do think that we've created a nice pipeline to support our national training programs.
So you've also made the transition to coaching. How would you describe your coaching style?
Oh, crap. Very similar to the way I played in the fact that I think I'm very intense. I appreciate when I played that everything seemed like it was in slow motion and I was able to take in the entire match in maybe a blink of an eye. And I hope that I still am able to do that as a coach. I think I can. I was a little bit more fiery on the court. I try to be a little more calm on the sidelines. I never want my kids to feel like their back's against the wall. And that we will work through everything. And I think more so as a coach, I just have total faith in the fundamentals. If you don't have the fundamentals, you cannot exist at this level. And it doesn't matter who you play for, you must have the fundamentals because all of us have different systems that we like to teach.
Sure. Well, this is my final question. So you're sitting here with this screen behind you, your name up in lights. What does it mean to be inducted into the Volleyball Hall of Fame?
I don't know if it's hit yet. A lot of people have asked me since I found out, that's amazing. And it is. It's an incredible honor. It's almost like a gift. It happened like 2 days before my birthday. I'm like, man, this is just all working out too well. But I don't know if it's really hit. I'm just trying to take it all in and make sure my family enjoys the process and as well with the other nominees and the inductees. And it's just very special. There's no way to explain how a young kid from the Midwest of a town of 30,000 ending up in the Hall of Fame.
Well, I know you've been an inspiration to many, and I really appreciate having this chance to speak with you. We've been speaking with Volleyball Hall of Fame class of 2013 honoree Caren Kemner. This is Volleyball in Perspective, and I'm your host, Joel Daring. Thank you for watching.